Scrolling on social media at the gym has always been a pretty hot topic because people tend to feel quite strongly about it. It turns out this might not just be a pet peeve of people, but it might actually have some scientific backing as well. So right now we're going to look at this randomized control trial where they randomly assigned people to either scrolling on social media for half an hour or watching a documentary for half an hour before their weight training session. But before we do that, my name is George. I'm a published researcher specializing in the area of muscle health. I do short videos condensing the latest scientific studies around muscle building so that you don't have to wait until they come out in the mainstream media. So as always, let's get started with where this study took place. Well, this was actually in South America, Brazil, at the Federal University of Paraíba, which is a pronunciation I've probably just butchered. And essentially researchers at this university recruited 20 university students. These 20 students had to be somewhat familiar with weight training. So their criteria for this study was they had to have trained for at least a year and for an average of 3 times a week. To give you an indication of the training level of these people, the average back squat was 75 kilos. Once these people agreed to take part, they were randomly then assigned to 2 different groups. Group 1 were told to go on social media, specifically X, Facebook, or Instagram, and they were actively encouraged to go on that social media platform and actually engage. So to the point, the researchers encouraged them to comment, reply to messages, and even post on these apps. So they were locked into that screen for 30 minutes. Group 2, on the other hand, well, they went into a separate room where they watched a documentary. The documentary was titled Secrets of NASA Series 1, Episode 5. So once this 30 minutes was up, both groups were then asked to do a warm-up. Following the warm-up, they then completed 3 sets of a back squat. Now, the researchers call this a half back squat because what they were asking people to do was essentially stop when they reached 90 degrees. And they were asked to use a weight that was 80% of whatever their 15 rep max was. Now, this was done on the Smith machine and they took each set to failure, doing 3 sets in total with 3 minutes of rest in between each set. Now, if we rewind for a second, one thing I didn't mention was 1 week before this, participants had come into the gym and had done this same workout, but without doing the 30 minutes of social media scrolling or documentary. So that gave the researchers an indication of what they could normally do, and then they had about a week to get rid of any fatigue before they then did this experiment. So what did they measure? Well, the researchers were looking at volume load here. So for those not familiar, volume load is the total amount of weight lifted, which is expressed as sets multiplied by reps multiplied by the weight. They also looked at how participants felt, and they did this by asking them. They had a 0 to 100 scale where 100 would be completely mentally fatigued and drained, and 0 would be fresh as anything. So let's get on to the results. What did they find? Well, both groups lifted considerably less than they did when they first came into the gym. When they first came in, they lifted about 3,700 kilograms in total over the 3 sets, but the week of the experiment, this was closer to about 3,000 kilograms. However, when they looked at the social media versus the documentary group as to which drop-off was more severe, they saw that the group who were scrolling social media before their session, they saw a 29% drop-off in their total volume, whereas the group who were watching the documentary, they dropped off by only 15%. Then when they asked people how they felt, this was also different between the 2 groups. The group that was scrolling social media before the session, they actually reported that they felt more mentally fatigued once that session had finished. But the same wasn't seen with the documentary group. In fact, this was fairly unchanged. So what are the main take-home points from a study like this? Well, it was quite a small study, so anything we do take from this, definitely take with a pinch of salt. But it was clear that scrolling social media in this case was more mentally fatiguing than not scrolling social media. And what this study has shown is that that might actually have a knock-on effect to your performance in the gym. Now, this might not be a huge shock to some people. We should know that mental fatigue has an impact on our physical performance. If you've ever had a really long, tough day at work or school and then you go to train and it's not a great session, you've probably experienced this too. But I think it would be interesting to see if this effect lasts long term. For example, we might see that higher screen time in the long term is linked to lower performance in the gym and therefore perhaps less gains. But that is a bit of a stretch at the moment, and this research is very much short term. But for what it's worth, and if you do want to take something into your own training from this, I would say maybe avoid social media an hour before your session and instead opt for something that might be a little less cognitively and emotionally demanding. And I think that's particularly relevant with the state of social media nowadays. So thanks for watching, everyone. As always, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you soon in the next video.